So there was a woman walking along a path with a horse. But this wasn't just any horse, you see. This horse was the horse of power, and this is relevant to our story because it is a story that we're entering. The woman and the horse had a special connection. They could speak, but telepathically. And so you couldn't tell they were talking, but this day in particular, when they were walking along their path, they were definitely talking. And their path was in the middle of a forest, and the forest was tall and it was deep. The kind of forest that reaches and touches the sky. The pines were high, and the light got through in some places, but it was mostly dark. And so you see, we join the horse and the girl on this path in this forest. When the girl notices that there's a light coming from up the path, thinking this is peculiar, she speeds up a little bit. And what she sees before her is a giant flaming feather. And so she looks at the horse, and they speak the way they speak, and she asks the horse, "What is this?" And the horse says, "Oh, it looks to be a feather from the great Firebird." And so the girl examines it again, and as she goes to pick it up, the horse says, "No, wait. If you pick that feather up, you will know more about pain and suffering than you currently know. And so I put it to you. Would you pick that feather up?" Well, for the sake of our story, let's imagine you did. Otherwise, we'd be joining them again another day. The girl, she picks the feather up and takes a deeper look at it and decides she's going to go to the neighboring village because it's a really beautiful feather, and she knows there's a queen in that village, and she thinks that queen will really appreciate this feather. And so off they go along the path, and they're walking for a long time until they hit the edge of the giant village, and she's going through, and she's carrying this giant feather, and people are looking at her. She reaches the gates of the castle, and she's let through, and when she finally speaks to the queen's eyes were huge and round. You know when you spot something that you were surprised to see, but you're in a good mood to see it? Well, she was very excited, and she clapped her hands, and immediately a giant feast started and a party, and they feasted and they partied for 3 days and 3 nights, and the young woman was talking to the queen, and she's like, "Oh, you know, if you want to give me some kind of a reward for this, I would really appreciate that. That would be great. But, you know, something happened that third evening. The queen's face, it changed, and she, well, you know, that look that people get when they're beginning to think. It's not always the same, but the queen, she, the queen looked at the girl and she said, "You know, this feather is great, but I'm a great queen. Look at the size of my village and the people that I care for. A woman like me deserves more than a mere feather. She deserves the entire bird. And so I put it to you. You have 24 hours to bring me the entire bird, or the distance between your neck and your shoulders will increase marginally." And so with that, the queen, she turned, and the young woman, she left the castle in a little bit of a panic. You can imagine it's a little bit of a scary thing to hear. You've come with such a beautiful gift, and then all of a sudden your life is a little bit on the line. Well, more than a little bit. This queen wasn't particularly known for being kind. And so the young woman went outside, and when she went to speak with her horse is looking at her going, you don't look like somebody who's coming back with a whole bunch of riches, and you don't look very happy. What's happened? And so the young girl explains, and the horse looks at her and thinks for a moment, and then says, "Oh, not to worry. You're going to go back in, you're going to tell the queen that you need 24 gallons of corn. And you're going to need a large tarp, and you're going to need rope, a lot of rope." And the girl looks at the horse and says, "What am I going to do with all that?" And the horse says, "Have I ever failed you yet?" The girl said, no, I guess not. The horse said, the trouble is not now. The trouble is yet to come. So the girl shakes her head and decides to trust the horse, because that's what she does, and off she goes. She goes inside, and the queen easily gets her what she's looking for, and it's not a problem at all, and comes back out, and the horse says, okay, you see that really large field over there, the one with the giant tree just on the side? Well, I'm going to be up in that tree with the tarp and the rope, and you are going to lay all of this corn through the field in giant ribbons and in a large circle, and the point is that the end of that trail is going to meet somewhere underneath the trees. I'm going to be waiting up in the tree. Can you do that? And the girl says, of course. So she goes ahead and she lays out the entire field. It takes a little bit of time, you can imagine. The horse says, okay, well, now it's your job to get up in the tree as well and to just wait. You're just going to wait very quietly. I'm not going to say anything at all, and you'll see that Firebird's going to show up. And lo and behold, they hadn't been up in that tree very long when the Firebird could be heard in the distance. And then as they gazed up, the bird was circling small. And then as it came down, it was getting larger and larger in large round hoops until it finally touched down on the ground. It looked around very skeptically, but it had seen the corn from quite a distance, and there was a lot of corn, and that bird was large and it was hungry. And so it walked forward cautiously and began to eat. But it wouldn't eat more than 2 or 3 mouthfuls without looking up and looking around again. And at the other side of the field, the horse had come out of the tree at that point and was eating corn, but at the other end of the field. And so the bird was looking at it suspiciously, taking a couple bites, looking back up, but the horse completely ignored that the bird was there. And so eventually, as they continued to eat, the bird got comfortable and forgot the horse was there too, and was just busy filling itself because it was hungry, and this was a lot of food, and was eating and eating and eating, and the sun had begun to move in the sky. It was about at that halfway mark, maybe a little bit further forward, and at that point, the girl was in the tree, now with the tarp and the rope, and you remember how the horse and the girl could speak telepathically? Well, the horse and the bird were very close, a couple feet now. The bird completely forgotten that the horse was there. It was just busy trying to get as much food as it could in the last little bit. And at that point, the horse said, okay, on your marks, get set. And now, and the girl, having known what the horse had said earlier, quickly jumped out of the tree with the tarp. And at that point, the horse jumped on top of the tarp, pinning down the wings and the feet of the bird, and the girl took the rope and she wrapped the bird up. Wow. That was it. Girl was pleased. Horse was happy. Off they went. They presented this giant, beautiful Firebird to the queen, and the queen's eyes bugged up again. She was excited, and again she clapped her hands, and again they had a party for 3 days and 3 nights. But you know, people are typical. They repeat themselves, and on that 3rd night, the queen got that look on her face again, and the girl went, oh, queen came over and she said, you know, I'm a great queen, and that bird is wonderful, but I'm a queen, and I deserve something grander than that. You know, there's a young prince. I've tried to get to know him a few times now and just haven't. He's always off sailing and adventuring, and I haven't been able to yet. There's a prince, he's on the ocean, the neighboring ocean. I would really like you to go and get him and bring him to me so I can marry him. You have 48 hours to do that. And if you're not able to do it, well, the distance between your neck and your shoulders will increase by the width of my sword. Well, with that, the girl was off, and again she went outside, and again the horse said, you don't look particularly happy for somebody who's just been having a party for 3 days. And so the young woman explains what has happened, and the horse says, oh, don't panic yet. Go ahead and ask the queen for one of her grandest ships. You're going to ask for 12 men. You're going to ask for beautiful tapestries and a very sumptuous lunch and a bottle of brandy. And the girl says, what's that going to do? Horse says, come on. Do you trust me? Have I led you astray before? I said, I guess not. The horse said, no. The trouble's not now. The trouble is yet to come. And so the girl shakes her head and off she goes. When she asks the queen for what she needs, the queen very quickly and eagerly obliges. And so the girl prepares the ship, and she has the 12 men, and they're getting ready to set off. And the horse is telling her now, in the front of the ship, you're going to create a giant tent out of those beautiful tapestries. You're going to lay some on the ground, and you're going to lay some up and around, and you're going to have the tent doors open, and in the middle of that, you're going to lay out this beautiful picnic. And one of the men, he's going to sit there playing on an instrument, some soft music, and you're going to wait. And so the young girl says, okay, gets into the tent after making it. She's laid out her lunch, and off they go, and they're sailing for a little bit when they spot another ship. And I mean, those men must have seen her sitting in the front of the ship like that, because that other ship began to come forward, you know, as people do sometimes. And when it finally met her ship, ships coming up next to each other like that, the young prince hopped off and came over and introduced himself and asked what she was doing, and said he had spotted her from a distance, and she looked like she had something beautiful laid out, and she said, oh, I'm just having a lunch, would you like to join me? And so he did. Well, they got to talking, and as sometimes happens when young people get together, they found that they really enjoyed each other's company. And so she invited him to have lunch. They were eating and talking some more, and she pulled the bottle of brandy out, and you remember her and the horse had a different way of communicating, and so the horse said, okay, well, you're going to need to give him that brandy now, but it's a pretty powerful brandy. You can't have any. You just got to give it to him. And so the girl gives him the brandy, and the young man drinks it and falls asleep. The horse says, quickly, you take that tapestry that's right from under him, and you're going to roll him up in it, and we're going to head back. And so that's what they did, and they were bringing the young man wrapped in the tapestry over to the queen, and the queen was clapping and very excited, and, you know, they were unrolling the young man, and he was coming to, a little bit disoriented, wondering what had just happened, and he's looking around, and he spots the queen, and he's a little bit startled. You see, he had managed to avoid this particular queen for a very long time. And she looked at him, she smiled. Well, now that we've come together, will you marry me? The young man said, okay. Maybe not saying it out loud, but you know when you look at people and they've got that look on their face, like, wait, probably not. Probably is not going to be a good idea. But this particular queen was very excited and didn't seem to care what he thought. And so he tried to find some way out of it. He looked at the queen and he said, well, you're a wonderful queen, and it's not that I wouldn't marry you this instant. It's just that I made a promise to my mother on her dying bed. The queen said, well, what was that promise? And he said, well, I told her that if I was ever to get married, I would get married in the suit that she had made me. But you see, the problem is that suit is in a chest at the bottom of the ocean, under a rock. And so the queen looked at the young girl, and the young girl dropped her head back again. The queen said, well, this will be your final task. You're to go and retrieve that chest that has the suit in it from the bottom of the ocean, where the distance between your neck and your shoulders will be widened by the width of my sword. You have 24 hours. And so the girl left, and, you know, she didn't look panicked as she left the castle this time. She just looked resolved. She didn't know how they were going to be able to do this. And as she was telling the horse of power looked at her and said, we're going to go sit on the beach by the ocean. And the girl said, is that all we're doing? And the horse says, that's all I can help you with. But do you trust me? The girl said, yeah, I guess. The horse said, no, don't worry, the trouble's not now, the trouble's still to come. And so they headed off, and the horse left the girl on the beach. And by this point, you know, it was late in the night, and the moon was out, and the waves, they were shining, and she sat there for some time, thinking about her life and what had brought her up until this point, and how she'd picked up that feather. Well, the sun was beginning to rise, and the most peculiar things started to happen. The sand around her started to move, and as she looked more closely, there were little pops. And as the sand popped open, baby turtles had come out. And she'd never seen anything like this before. She was watching them excitedly as they began to move out towards the ocean. And she was cheering them on, and it was a beautiful thing to see. But then this one little turtle popped up, and it was facing the wrong direction. And it started to go up towards the grass, and the girl, seeing it, plucked it up and turned it around, and it started moving back towards the ocean. And at that point, she heard a great thank you. And as she turned, she saw the largest grandmother sea turtle she'd ever imagined. And the grandmother sea turtle looked at her and she said, well, you know, every year I come here to watch the turtles go to the ocean. And some of them make it, but not everyone. And I'm not allowed to help. I'm not allowed to turn them around, but it's okay if you do. So for that, I thank you. The girl was very touched, and the grandmother turtle said, if there's anything I can ever do for you, please let me know. And the girl said, actually, you know, there is something you can help me with. And so she described the giant chest that was sitting at the bottom of the ocean under this large particular rock, and she asked the grandmother turtle if she'd seen it. The grandmother turtle said, yeah, I have actually seen that. She said, you just wait here. I'll be back. And so she took off. Well, hours and hours ran by, and, you know, it was getting really close. You remember, she was only given 24 hours. Wow. Just when things were starting to look a little bit dark, the grandmother sea turtle popped up from the top of the ocean. Well, she had dolphins and seals and otters and crabs and small fish and large fish, and they all seemed to be carrying what looked like a large chest. They brought it over to the side of the shore. The girl excitedly ran over, and as they all spread out, the sea turtle said, oh, this is the chest. And the girl said, ah. She was very, very excited, and she opened it up, and inside there was a suit, and she thanked the grandmother sea turtle, leaning over and giving her a large hug, and she began to drag it back up along the shore. And at that point, the horse of power reappeared and said, see, things are not so bad. And the girl was looking at the horse and grinning a little bit, but also like, you know, that was a little bit too close for comfort. And so they brought the chest up to the castle, and the young man was so besides himself because he never thought he was going to see that chest in that particular suit again. And so he ran over and he flung the chest open and he pulled out the suit and took a deep breath, and it still smelled like his mother. And so the queen quickly said, now will you marry me? And the young man said, no, but I'll marry the young woman who brought this suit to me. Oh, well. You can imagine the queen's response to that. And so she clapped her hands, and the young man and the young woman were tied up, and a large pot was rolled out from the kitchen and filled with water and was placed atop a giant pyre that had been made. They lit the fire, and the pot began to boil, and they brought over something for the young man and the young woman to step on and be brought into, and they were gonna cook them. You see, the queen had decided if she wasn't gonna marry the prince, that nobody was. And so in those final hours before being sacrificed to this giant pot of water, the young woman had quite a bit of time to think, and she asked the queen, she said, you know, I understand and I'm accepting my fate, but do you think you could grant me one last request, a dying woman's request? And the queen said, potentially. What would you like? And the young woman said, well, I would like to just go say goodbye to my horse. The Queen said, all right, but she looked at the guards and she said, now you make sure nothing funny happens, because if it does, it'll be you in that pot. And so they brought the young girl out, but you remember she was able to speak with the horse in a different kind of a way, and so she told the horse what was going on, and the horse said, oh, I know what you have to do. When they go to bring you to that pot, you cannot let them drag you into it. You must get away from them. You must run up the steps and you must dive in yourself. Well, you can imagine upon hearing that, the girl would be a little bit confused, but the horse said, have I led you astray yet? And the girl said, no. The horse said, don't worry. The trouble is not now, the trouble is still to come. And with that, the girl re-entered the castle. And as they went to take her down, to put her in the pot, she managed to escape, and she quickly ran up the steps and with 2 leaps dove gracefully into the pot. Well, she was gone for some time. But you see, she re-emerged. And she re-emerged looking like she had gone to a 5-day spa. Her hair was glistening and her skin was clear and her eyes were bright and she was smiling and she looked very calm. Well, upon seeing that, the queen thought, I don't know, she's looking pretty good. And so she ran and she dived into the pot as well. Well, you can imagine there was now a vacancy in the kingdom. And so the young girl and the young prince, they married. And they became queen and king. And they feasted for 3 days and for 3 nights. And the horse could be heard saying that the trouble is now. And they gave me a bottle of brandy to share when I told the story. But I fell down and I broke the bottle of brandy. So all I have for you is this story. All my relations, now that's yours to share.